So I've been using the max effort method as a consistent part of my training for years. And over the last 6 months, that frequency was up to twice a week, which was one of the key strategies in acquiring a 405 bench. Now, along this journey, I've learned some key lessons that I'd love to share with you today. First being, recovery isn't as bad as you think once you get used to the skill of maxing out, because that's really what it is. When you start off, the ramp ups don't look too clean. You might go from 85% straight into 100. Therefore, hitting RPE 10, maximum grinders, slow, ugly, uneven reps. Hey, expect to fail a little bit starting off. But as you get better, acquiring more experience, the process starts to look a bit more streamlined, a lot more smooth, to the extent that you're no longer doing the traditional bro jumps. 135, 225, 275, 315, to name an example. You take your time and you start to realize that, hey, I shouldn't do more than 3 attempts, but they should also be similar within range, as in going from 85, 90, 95. Hey, perhaps 100% balls to the wall is not the answer, because we're building our strength, not trying to test it, and that extra strainage is probably not needed to get really good strength results. Remember, this is not a competition, so there's no need to ego lift or overly hype yourself up. And when you really take your time with the warm-ups, you gain the confidence to estimate with pretty much 90% accuracy what your max will be for that day. Whereas if you're going by arbitrary standards, like a plate and a half, or just trying to get an even number in either pounds or kilos, yeah, it looks good on paper, but in most cases, it won't be correctly synced to how your body's feeling that day. With time, you'll eventually come to the same realization, because it really is percentage and intuition based. So by efficiently working your way up and selecting the right numbers, you'll find the workout recovery to be far superior. And that in itself will allow you to use this method long term. Basically, the skill is being further refined. What you started off with is no longer the case. You have adapted. And this is pretty much what we see in those who run Bulgarian programs. You just get really good at doing singles. Just put in perspective, if you got guys going 90% every single day on big compound movements, what makes you think that once a week is that harmful? It isn't, provided that you actually stay committed to this process. I want you to completely detach yourself from the PR aspect. Obviously, this will occur, but don't overthink too much about it. Just do what you gotta do, work up to your singles, move on to the accessories. And what you'll also find is that the variations, how you select the correct blendage over time, will also make a massive difference in weekly or monthly recovery. Here's what I mean. I found you can't abuse the overloads, especially when maxing out twice a week. In this case, the variations need to be completely different. As in, Monday is a close grip raw floor press. Thursday, Swiss bar bench with 60 or 90 pounds of chains. In this case, it's still a 1 rep max, but we're factoring in the concept of absolute load. So stimulus to fatigue matters a lot in this discussion, and that's why you have to pick movements that have different joint angles. One workout, more or less weight. The second, overload. Or you can just keep it normal all the way through, like only doing straight weight variations, for example. Week 1, floor press. Week 2, Swiss bar bench. Week 3, close grip, pause bench. Stuff like that. But please do not do overloads back to back. So week 1, bench press with doubled light bands. Week 2, bench with 90 pounds of chains. Week 3, Swiss bar bench with 90 pounds of chains. It's too much, and you're more likely to suffer overuse, because yeah, you might be minimizing the bottom tension aspect, but the lockout itself is going to be brutal, to the extent that reps will look a lot more grindy. All of my raw PRs are faster than my accommodating resistance PRs. And keep in mind, the top weight is more than what you could press off the chest. Not to mention the fact there's still a good deal of bottom tension. So it's important not to do that every single time, all right? This is something I figured out with experience, especially when I started maxing out twice a week. That's what really brought me to school. And what's cool is that Dave Tate and Louis Simmons already talked about this years ago. I just realized that after the fact. They were abusing the band tension, going way too excessive on that, to the point where the bands exceeded the straight bar weight. That's like me doing 2 plates on the bench with over 200 pounds of chains. I can probably lift it, but high chance my body will feel like absolute garbage after that. By the way, I'll also say that auto-regulation matters in this case. Depending how your previous session went, may be a bit achy in some areas. Therefore, don't overstress it. Pick a variation that lightens the load slightly in that targeted region while emphasizing something else a bit more. For example, if your shoulders are a little bit trash from weighted dips, maybe you shouldn't do a regular pause bench on a straight bar. Switch to the Swiss bar bench. This way we got that neutral action going on. We're still working on the flat press, but it's a little bit more tricep dominant. And that extra elbow tuck will alleviate some of that pressure, meaning next week you'll come back in that much more fresh, and you'll probably need less deloads as a result. But I will say that you're still gonna have to deload regardless if you're someone who maxes out a lot. So let me give you my guideline on that. Matt Wenning recommends every 3 weeks you deload one aspect, right? I found that every 4 to 6 weeks is pretty much all you need. And I think that has to do with the fact that he's a super elite lifter, far beyond our level. So that level of absolute load is something we're not experiencing. Now, you can still follow his recommendation, but I found that it doesn't have to be that frequent. So 4 to 6 is your nice little sweet spot. Okay, so enough about that. Let's finish off this video with a little bit of programming wisdom. If you're using concurrent periodization, your volume and intensity is kept high throughout the yearly training cycle, meaning your sets aren't going to vary too much week to week, and you can actually maintain the same percentages and repetitions. The major variable being modified is exercise selection. In the case of max effort, that's every week, and for the accessories, it could be every 3 weeks, every 4 to 6, or every week if you want to really mix it up like that. So if we know that everything can be maintained, including the max effort stuff, why not rock with a more power building type of approach? As in only doing singles with hypertrophy work. Perhaps you can drop your triples and fives temporarily, just get really good at maxing, and then stick to reps of 6 to 10 since they have a pretty good stimulus fatigue ratio, maybe even the higher stuff too, 15 to 20, and don't overthink anything beyond that point. This allows for extremely easy programming that actually works because we're training the most specific way for raising our raw, squat, bench, deadlift, or whatever competition lift you wish to improve upon, and then we're maximally developing the muscles that contribute to that lift. Sure, it might be hard on recovery, but that's why we got the deloads while paying attention to our exercise selection. As long as you're managing that correctly and you're sleeping like a king, eating ideally in a surplus or somewhat of a maintenance, like you're not trying to cut aggressively, I don't see why this wouldn't be extremely viable for a large percentage of my audience, because we know that we can keep the same sets and reps in year round. So why not go extreme on both scales? The extremity of absolute strength with the extremity in the efficient sense of hypertrophy type workouts. Because the truth is, you can build muscle in any rep range, right? So for those who are just fed up of having to manage all these different sets and reps, or looking at different high intensity percentages, stop overthinking it. Just do a lot of singles and a lot of hypertrophy work on the side. All you got to do. Again, not saying it's optimal, but I think it'll be very helpful to a lot of you who watch this video right now. And it's certainly been good in my journey, though I'll probably go back to mixing in a little bit more stuff because I do think that's the better approach, just slightly more complicated. Anyway, that's all I got for you guys today. Some 1 rep max lessons that I've picked up over the years. Hope you enjoyed this segment and apply them to your weekly workouts because you're going to see some big changes when you start doing this. So let me know how it goes, and I'll talk to you all in the next video.